The aroma of a simple home-cooked meal filled Sarah's small apartment, a familiar comfort on an otherwise unremarkable Tuesday evening. She moved with a practiced ease, clearing her dinner plate before settling onto the worn armchair, a well-loved novel already open in her hands. Sarah cherished these quiet moments, the predictable rhythm of her life, a soothing counterpoint to the chaotic world outside. Her day had wound down, and the promise of a good book before bed was a perfect end to it all. Just as the first sigh of relaxation escaped her, her phone buzzed, illuminating the dim room. It was Emily, her younger sister, a vibrant force of nature who rarely adhered to Sarah's strict evening quietude. Sarah smiled, a warm affection blooming in her chest, and answered. Emily's voice, a cheerful cascade of observations about her day, filled the receiver. They discussed trivial things, a new coffee shop, a funny meme, the latest episode of a popular show. Sarah listened, half reading, half engaging, enjoying the familiar banter. Emily mentioned a slight draft in her old house, then something about a strange noise she'd heard earlier, dismissing it with a laugh. Suddenly the line crackled with static, then went dead. Sarah pulled the phone away, frowning slightly. "Emily," she called out, but only the dial tone responded. She dismissed it, a momentary annoyance. Probably just a bad connection, she thought, typical of Emily's somewhat isolated home. She'd call back in a moment, surely. But Emily didn't call back. A subtle unease began to creep in. Minutes stretched into 10, then 15. Sarah's eyes kept darting to her phone, the open book now forgotten in her lap. The memory of Emily's last words, the casual mention of a strange noise, now resonated with a peculiar weight. Had there been something else, a muffled sound just before the abrupt cutoff? A faint, almost imperceptible gasp? Sarah tried to push the thought away, telling herself she was being silly, overthinking things. She tried calling Emily's number, her fingers trembling slightly as she dialed. It rang twice, then went straight to voicemail. "Hey, it's Emily. Leave a message. You know the drill." Her sister's chipper voice chirped, a stark contrast to the growing dread in Sarah's stomach. She tried again, and again, each attempt met with the same automated message. The silence in her apartment suddenly felt oppressive, heavy. The thought, unthinkable just moments ago, solidified into a chilling certainty. Something was wrong. Her heart began to pound, a frantic drum against her ribs. With a deep, shuddering breath, Sarah dialed 911. The operator's calm, professional voice answered, "911, what is your emergency?" Sarah struggled to articulate the vague fear, the missing sister, the cut-off call. Her voice came out as a breathless whisper. "My sister. I think something's happened to her. The call just stopped." The operator, patient and steady, advised her to stay calm and provide details. "Can you tell me your sister's name and address, ma'am? When did you last speak to her?" As Sarah rattled off the information, the chilling realization hit her fully. Emily lived alone, her house nestled deep within a secluded wooded area far from immediate neighbors. Help wouldn't be just around the corner. The operator explained the process of dispatching officers, her words a technical drone against Sarah's rising panic. Sarah felt a profound sense of isolation, of helplessness, as she clutched the phone, waiting. A seed of suspicion began to sprout, thorny and cold. This couldn't be just an accident. Her mind flashed back to Mark, Emily's troubled ex-boyfriend, his possessive nature, the violent arguments that had once plagued Emily's life. No, it couldn't be him. He was out of their lives, wasn't he? Sarah tried to reassure herself, to conjure a simple explanation, a power outage, a lost phone, anything less terrifying than the alternative. She remembered her last conversation with Emily, a foolish, petty argument about forgotten plans. The guilt was a bitter taste in her mouth. She wished she could take back every sharp word. Then, faint at first, the wail of sirens pierced the night, a double-edged sword of relief and terror. The 911 call marked a definitive end to normalcy, a line crossed from comfort into chaos. Her world, she knew, was about to be irrevocably altered. "Stay on the line until help arrives," the operator instructed, her voice a lifeline. But then, a click, and the line disconnected. The silence that followed was deafening, suffocating. Sarah began to pace, her eyes darting to the windows, a primal sense of being watched prickling her skin. The question hung heavy in the air, a cold, unyielding weight. What truly happened to Emily? Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. The wail of sirens grew louder, then abruptly ceased, signaling their arrival at Emily's secluded home. Sarah, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs, watched from the edge of the darkened driveway as two police cruisers pulled up, their flashing blue and red lights painting the familiar landscape in stark, unsettling hues. Officers emerged, their figures silhouetted against the night, their movements purposeful and grim. Sarah's breath hitched as she observed the scene. Emily's front door was slightly ajar, a silent, gaping maw, and a shattered window glinted ominously in the porch light. It wasn't a bad connection, it was a violation. Her body trembled uncontrollably as the officers, their flashlights cutting through the darkness, approached the house. One of them, a burly man with a serious countenance, gestured for Sarah to remain behind the police tape, now being strung across the entrance. The agonizing wait outside stretched into an eternity, every second a torment. She imagined Emily, alone and terrified, reliving the last moments of their call, the muffled sound that now echoed with chilling clarity in her mind. The air grew heavy with unspoken fear, pressing down on Sarah as she watched the officers disappear inside. Minutes later, a figure emerged from the house, taller than the others, his face etched with a grim expression. He was the lead detective, his presence radiating an aura of quiet authority that did little to soothe Sarah's frayed nerves. He walked towards her with measured steps, his eyes conveying a message before his lips even moved. "Your sister isn't here, ma'am," he stated, his voice low and devoid of emotion. Yet the words struck Sarah with the force of a physical blow. The confirmation of her darkest fears sent a wave of despair washing over her, threatening to drown her entirely. He led her cautiously to the entrance, pointing to the scene within. The living room was a tableau of chaos. Overturned furniture, a shattered vase lying in glittering shards on the floor, cushions strewn haphazardly. It was undeniable evidence of a struggle, a violent intrusion into Emily's peaceful life. Then, his flashlight beam settled on a small silver locket, glinting amidst the debris. It was broken. Its delicate chain snapped. Sarah gasped. A cry caught in her throat. She recognized it instantly. Emily had worn that locket every single day since childhood, a cherished gift from their grandmother. Its broken state was a stark symbol of Emily's shattered security. The detective turned to her, his gaze piercing. "Do you know of anyone who might wish your sister harm? Any recent troubles, enemies, estranged relationships?" Sarah's mind immediately leapt to Mark, Emily's ex-boyfriend. His controlling nature, his explosive temper, the way he'd never truly let go. "Mark," she whispered, the name tasting like ash in her mouth. Mark Stevens. He was possessive. The detective's pen scratched quietly on his notepad, a flicker of interest in his otherwise impassive eyes. He noted Mark's name, a new thread in the unraveling nightmare. Police began their investigation in earnest, transforming Emily's quaint home into a sterile crime scene. Sarah felt utterly helpless, the cold reality of abduction sinking its teeth into her. A painful memory surfaced. Sarah, much younger, shielding Emily from a schoolyard bully, a fierce protectiveness rising from deep within. Now, she felt that same primal urge, but Emily was gone, and Sarah had been powerless to protect her. The detective's cold, factual tone as he continued his questions contrasted sharply with Sarah's raw, emotional turmoil. Emily was truly gone, not just missing. They took Sarah's statement, every detail scrutinized, every word a painful echo of the 911 call, the last sounds of her sister. The detective's final words before leaving, "We'll do everything we can," offered little solace. Sarah was left alone again, in the now empty, violated home, the locket clutched tight in her hand, a tangible, broken piece of Emily. But as the initial fear began to subside, a burning determination took its place. She wouldn't just wait. She would find her sister. A promise, whispered to the empty air, filled the silence. "I'm coming for you, Emily." Fueled by a potent cocktail of desperation and gnawing guilt, Sarah embarked on her own, unofficial investigation. Her first and most obvious lead was Mark, Emily's volatile ex-boyfriend, now firmly entrenched as the primary suspect in her mind. His name had been the first to tumble from her lips, a reflex of fear and dark memory. She drove to his old apartment, a place Emily had once been forced to frequent, only to find it vacant, a dusty, hollow shell mirroring the emptiness in her heart. Memories of Emily's tumultuous relationship with Mark flooded Sarah's thoughts, each one a fresh stab of pain. His jealousy had been a suffocating blanket, his controlling nature a constant shadow. She recalled a particularly vicious argument, the harsh words echoing through the flimsy walls of Emily's old place, culminating in Mark's fist slamming into the kitchen counter, splintering the wood. Sarah had been there, a terrified witness, stepping between them, her own fear momentarily eclipsed by the fierce need to protect her younger sister. It was a dark side of Mark that Emily had tried, often unsuccessfully, to hide. The police had called, their tone dismissive, informing Sarah that they had indeed questioned Mark, but he possessed an airtight alibi for the night Emily vanished. Sarah's disbelief was a cold, hard knot in her stomach. An alibi. It felt impossible. She was utterly convinced Mark was involved, his temper and possessiveness too deeply ingrained to be coincidental. Ignoring the detective's implicit warning to stay out of the official proceedings, Sarah dug deeper, reaching out to old friends of Emily's and, more reluctantly, Mark's. She pieced together fragments of information, uncovering details about Mark's past. A history of aggression, a short fuse, a temper that had often flared without warning. One friend, a nervous young woman who had seen the worst of Mark's outbursts, mentioned his almost obsessive attachment to a remote cabin he owned, a secluded spot deep in the woods that Emily had always detested. "She called it his lair," the friend had whispered, her eyes wide with remembered fear. Sarah's mind latched onto this, a new, unsettling possibility. The police, she realized with a jolt, might be missing something crucial, blinded by their procedural checkboxes. The emotional burden of reliving Emily's past struggles, of seeing her sister through the lens of Mark's cruelty, was immense, each recollection a fresh wound. A moment of doubt flickered. What if she was wrong about Mark? What if her grief and fear were twisting her perception? But then, the image of the broken locket, the overturned furniture, solidified her resolve. The detective's voice, stern and bordering on exasperated, had warned her again not to interfere with the official investigation. Sarah, however, possessed a stubborn refusal to give up, driven by a deep, unwavering love for Emily and an urgent primal need for answers. She couldn't simply stand by. Later, sifting through Emily's belongings, she found it, an old, leather-bound diary tucked away beneath a stack of forgotten letters. Inside, amongst pages filled with teenage angst and dreams, was a cryptic message, scrawled in Emily's hurried hand, hinting at a secret. "The hidden truth," it read, "and a debt to be paid." Sarah's growing suspicion that Emily had been keeping something from her intensified, a cold dread seeping into her bones. When she tried to share this with the detective, he was openly skeptical, dismissing her leads as emotional conjecture, causing a palpable friction between them. Sarah felt an increasing isolation as she continued to pursue her own path, the weight of her past argument with Emily pressing down on her, a constant nagging regret. She wished desperately she could take back her harsh words, the unspoken apologies hanging heavy in the air. Then, a new piece of information surfaced, delivered by a mutual acquaintance of Mark's and Emily's. Mark had recently lost his job, a high-paying position, and was facing significant financial strain. This added a new, chilling layer to the puzzle. Could there be a motive beyond simple jealousy? The shadowy figure of Mark loomed larger in Sarah's mind, his presence more sinister, more calculating. An unsettling feeling began to prickle at her, a sense of being watched, of eyes following her movements. The realization struck her with a cold certainty. Mark's alibi, so casually accepted by the police, might very well be a meticulously fabricated lie. Sarah, now convinced the police were barking up the wrong tree with their official, by-the-book investigation, decided to shift her entire focus to the remote cabin. The friend's fleeting mention of Mark's lair resonated with a sinister truth in her gut. She spent hours hunched over her laptop, tracing property records, cross-referencing satellite images with obscure county maps. Finally, she pinpointed its location. Deep within a sprawling, unnamed forest, miles from the nearest paved road. A sense of impending danger prickled her skin, a cold premonition of the isolation and wilderness she would soon face. Yet the thought of Emily, alone and terrified, propelled her forward, overriding any personal fear. She made one last, desperate attempt to involve the authorities, confronting the lead detective in his cluttered office. She laid out her theory, recounting the friend's nervous confession, the detail about Mark's obsession with the cabin, Emily's hatred for it. The detective, however, merely sighed, running a weary hand over his face. He dismissed it as a long shot, a desperate theory without concrete evidence, urging Sarah to let them handle the investigation. His bureaucratic indifference ignited a furious frustration within her. The slow, methodical pace of the official investigation felt like an agonizing waste of precious time Emily might not have. With a heavy heart and a hardened resolve, Sarah made the reckless decision to go to the cabin alone. It was an act born of pure desperation, a visceral need to do something, anything, to find her sister. She made a tense phone call to her parents, her voice carefully modulated to sound calm and reassuring, fabricating a story about needing to clear her head, all while carefully hiding her true, perilous intentions. The journey itself was a test of endurance. Long, winding dirt roads, barely more than animal trails, stretched endlessly before her, each turn taking her deeper into the oppressive silence of the forest. The growing sense of dread was almost palpable, a heavy cloak settling over her shoulders. She found herself drifting into memories of childhood adventures with Emily, their innocent laughter echoing in her mind, a stark and painful contrast to the grim reality she now faced. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the cabin appeared, a dilapidated structure swallowed by overgrown trees and thorny bushes. It seemed abandoned, a decaying monument to neglect. Sarah's heart sank, a wave of despair washing over her. Had she wasted precious time? Was this just another dead end? Another false hope? But then, her eyes caught something. Faint tire tracks marred the damp earth near the cabin, too fresh to be old, too distinct to be merely a deer trail. A flicker of hope, fragile yet persistent, ignited within her. Driven by this new clue, she scanned the perimeter, her gaze sharp and focused. Hidden beneath a tangle of thick, thorny bushes, she spotted it, a crudely fashioned wooden door, almost indistinguishable from the surrounding undergrowth. It was clearly a hidden entrance, leading downwards, perhaps to a cellar. Her breath hitched in her throat. As she pushed aside the thorny branches, a piece of fabric snagged on a sharp thorn. It was Emily's scarf, the delicate floral pattern, unmistakable, tangled and torn. A wave of relief, potent and overwhelming, surged through her, quickly followed by renewed terror. Emily had been here. She was on the right track. But the immense danger of her situation also slammed into her with full force. Before she could fully process this chilling discovery, the distinct sound of a car approaching in the distance sliced through the forest's quiet. Panic seized her. She scrambled, diving behind a thick cluster of pines, heart hammering against her ribs. The vehicle, a beat-up pickup truck, rumbled to a stop near the cabin. The figure that emerged from the driver's side was not Mark. It was a stranger, a burly man with a weathered face and cold eyes. He carried a large, heavy duffel bag slung over his shoulder, its contents unknown and unsettling. Sarah's confusion mounted, replacing pure fear with a complex web of questions. Who was this person? What was his connection to Emily? The situation was far more intricate, far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. The stranger entered the cabin, the heavy wooden door creaking shut behind him, the distinct click of the lock echoing in the oppressive silence. Sarah was now trapped outside, a new lead in her grasp, but also a new, terrifying mystery. She desperately fumbled for her phone, her fingers trembling, needing to contact the police. But the screen remained stubbornly blank. No signal. She was truly alone. Sarah, pressed against the rough bark of the pine, watched the cabin with a desperate intensity. The stranger had vanished inside, leaving her isolated and helpless, her phone a useless brick in her trembling hand. But then, a faint, almost imperceptible light caught her eye. It flickered erratically in a small, grimy basement window, barely visible through the overgrown weeds and broken panes. A sliver of hope, sharp and painful, pierced through her despair. Cautiously, she crept closer, each step deliberate, her heart thumping a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She lowered herself to the damp earth, peering through the dirt-streaked glass. The sight that greeted her sent a jolt through her entire being. There, huddled in a corner, was Emily. Alive. A wave of profound relief washed over Sarah, so potent it almost buckled her knees. But the relief was fleeting, quickly overshadowed by a renewed surge of terror. Emily was bound, her wrists and ankles secured with thick rope, and a crude gag silenced her mouth. Her eyes, wide with fear and despair, met Sarah's for a fleeting second, before darting away as the stranger's shadow loomed into view. He was moving about, his back to the window, oblivious to the desperate gaze fixed upon him. Sarah knew, with an agonizing certainty, that she couldn't just burst in. Such a move would be suicidal, jeopardizing both their lives. She needed a plan, a weapon. Her mind raced, sifting through memories, grasping for any advantage. Then, a vivid image flashed in her mind. The hidden hunting knife her father always kept in his old battered camping gear, still tucked under the passenger seat of her car. Its cold, sturdy presence was a distant comfort, a potential equalizer. The internal conflict raged. Should she risk everything and try to rescue Emily herself, or should she retreat, find a signal, and call for help? The image of Emily's terrified, pleading eyes settled the debate. There was no time to wait. Emily needed her now. With a renewed sense of purpose, Sarah moved silently back to her car, her movements swift and silent. She fumbled beneath the seat, her fingers closing around the worn leather sheath. Retrieving the knife, she felt its cold, heavy weight in her hand, a tangible extension of her desperate resolve. A fleeting flashback, sharp and clear, of her father patiently teaching her basic self-defense. The feel of a wooden stick in her hand, the importance of leverage and surprise. Armed with the knife and a fierce determination, Sarah began to circle the cabin once more, searching for a less obvious entry point. The front door was clearly out of the question, and the basement window was too small, too secure. Her gaze swept along the back wall, where the cabin seemed to sag slightly. There, partially obscured by more overgrown bushes, she found it. A loose board, warped and splintered, barely clinging to the rotten frame. It was a tight squeeze, leading into a dark, suffocating crawl space. With a deep breath, Sarah squeezed through the narrow opening, the dust and cobwebs clinging to her clothes and hair. The crawl through the confined, shadowy space was slow and tense, every creak and rustle amplifying her fear. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and decay. Muffled voices drifted down from above, indistinct at first, then slowly becoming clearer. She recognized the stranger's voice, a low, menacing rumble, punctuated by what sounded like Emily's faint whimpers, a sound that pierced Sarah's heart with anguish. The crawl space eventually opened into the cabin's pantry, a small, cluttered room filled with dusty shelves. Sarah quietly emerged, her body stiff and aching, the hunting knife held firmly in a white-knuckled grip. She strained to listen, her senses on high alert. The stranger was talking, his words now audible, heavy with a sense of grievance. He spoke of a past debt, a score to settle. Then, a chilling revelation. He wasn't acting alone. He was a hired hand, working for someone else. And that someone else. The name dropped like a stone into a still pond. Mark. Sarah's initial suspicions were confirmed, her gut instinct validated with a horrifying clarity. Mark. He had orchestrated Emily's abduction, but why? The stranger's words continued, hinting at a motive far more complex than simple revenge for a broken heart. He spoke of ruin and consequences, suggesting Mark's actions were driven by something deeper, something Emily had done to him. The true motive remained shrouded in mystery, but Mark's involvement was undeniable, confirming Sarah's darkest fears. A fierce protective instinct, primal and unwavering, surged through Sarah. She was no longer just a worried sister. She was a warrior, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The knife felt heavy, yet empowering in her hand. A moment of intense fear tried to grip her, but she pushed it down, replacing it with a cold, unwavering resolve. She realized, with a sickening lurch, that she wasn't just facing one man. She was up against a larger, more sinister conspiracy. Emily's life, and perhaps her own, hung precariously in the balance. The pantry door creaked open, a sound that ripped through the tense silence of the cabin. Sarah stepped out, her eyes blazing with a mixture of terror and unyielding resolve, the hunting knife clutched firmly in her hand. The stranger, startled by her sudden appearance, spun around, his eyes widening in disbelief before narrowing into a furious glare. He lunged, a guttural roar escaping his lips, his massive frame hurtling towards her. Sarah, despite her fear, reacted with a practiced swiftness, a memory of her father's self-defense lessons flashing through her mind. She sidestepped, the knife a blur, aiming not to wound, but to disarm. The struggle was brutal and quick. The stranger, caught off guard, stumbled, his momentum carrying him past her. Emily, seeing Sarah, emitted a desperate whimper, a sound that, despite the gag, was loud enough to momentarily distract their captor. This split second was all Sarah needed. She twisted, bringing the hilt of the knife down hard on his wrist, forcing him to drop the heavy wrench he had been holding. It clattered to the wooden floor with a deafening clang. Still, he was larger, stronger, and pure brute force was his advantage. He recovered, swinging a wild punch that narrowly missed Sarah's head. "You don't understand," the stranger gasped, his breath heavy, his eyes burning with a desperate anger. "Mark. He was ruined. Emily." She exposed his gambling operation. The authorities came down hard. He lost everything. His business, his reputation, his money. He's been planning this for months, meticulously, every detail. The words tumbled out, a torrent of bitter resentment, painting a picture of a man utterly consumed by vengeance. This isn't just about getting even. He wants to destroy her, make her pay for what she did. "And you," he added, a cruel smirk twisting his lips, "you're part of his grand finale." Sarah's blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" she demanded, her voice trembling despite her efforts to control it. "He's framing you," the stranger revealed, his voice dropping to a chilling whisper. "He planted evidence at your apartment, fake texts, fabricated emails, even some of Emily's belongings. He wants the police to think you snapped, that you were jealous, that you made her disappear." The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. The depth of Mark's malice, his twisted ingenuity, was almost unfathomable. It wasn't just about Emily. It was about destroying Sarah too, eliminating anyone who stood in his way, anyone who might expose him. The stranger, now subdued, seeing the shift in Sarah's expression, saw an opening. "I can help you," he offered, his desperation palpable. "Mark has a burner phone. He uses it for everything. Incriminating messages, details of his plan, everything. It's hidden, but I know where." Without hesitation, Sarah moved towards Emily, her hands working quickly to untie the ropes that bound her sister. Emily, released from her restraints, tore the gag from her mouth, her eyes welling with tears as she threw her arms around Sarah. "I'm so sorry, Sarah," Emily sobbed, her voice raw with guilt. "I never meant for any of this to happen. I thought I was doing the right thing, exposing his illegal operations. I never imagined he would go this far." The urgency of their situation pressed in on them. They had to act, and they had to act fast. Mark would be coming. The stranger, now surprisingly cooperative, pointed towards a loose floorboard near the fireplace. "It's under there," he muttered, his earlier defiance replaced by a desperate need for self-preservation. "He's on his way. He said he was coming to finish the job." A race against time had begun. Sarah knew they needed that phone, needed the evidence it contained to expose Mark's elaborate scheme and clear her own name. They had to get it before Mark arrived, before he could destroy it, before he could execute his final, horrific act. The bond between the sisters, once strained by a trivial argument, was now forged in the crucible of shared terror and unwavering loyalty. They were a team, united against a common enemy. The fear of Mark's impending arrival was a palpable presence in the cabin, a cold dread that clung to their skin. They knew his desperation would make him even more dangerous. Their plan was simple: retrieve the hidden phone, contact the authorities, and expose Mark for the monster he truly was. The realization that Mark's revenge was far more elaborate and cruel than simple abduction fueled their determination. It was a calculated, cold-blooded attempt to destroy both their lives. The distant crunch of tires on gravel, growing steadily louder, announced Mark's arrival. A cold dread gripped Sarah and Emily, intertwining with a fierce resolve. Mark burst through the cabin door, his eyes wild with a blend of fury and triumph, only to freeze at the sight of the stranger bound and Emily, unbound, standing beside Sarah. His triumphant smirk vanished, replaced by a snarl of disbelief. "What is this?" Mark's voice was a low growl, his gaze sweeping from the tied-up stranger to the two sisters. His eyes landed on the loose floorboard, now visibly disturbed, and a flicker of panic crossed his face. The burner phone? He knew. "It's over, Mark," Sarah stated, her voice surprisingly steady, a stark contrast to the tremor in her hands. "We know everything. Your plan, the planted evidence, the phone." Mark's face contorted, a mask of pure rage. "You think you can stop me?" he spat, taking a menacing step forward. "After everything you've done. Emily ruined my life, and you, Sarah, you dared to try and protect her. You're both going to pay." His eyes darted towards the fireplace, a clear indication of his next move. The phone. He lunged, a desperate, frantic movement towards the loose floorboard, his sole focus on destroying the incriminating evidence. Sarah, anticipating his move, intercepted him. A chaotic, desperate struggle for the small device ensued. Mark, fueled by adrenaline and the terror of exposure, fought with a savage intensity. He was stronger, but Sarah, driven by a protective fire she hadn't known she possessed, matched his ferocity. She twisted, turned, blocking his attempts to reach the phone, her hands grappling with his, their bodies colliding with the rough wooden walls of the cabin. Emily, still shaken but determined, tried to assist, shouting distractions, pushing at Mark's back, anything to create an opening for Sarah. Suddenly, a new sound cut through the frantic melee. The unmistakable wail of sirens, closer now, echoing through the forest. Mark's eyes widened, a primal fear replacing his rage. The police. His escape route was closing. In a desperate last-ditch effort, he seized Emily, yanking her roughly in front of him, using her as a human shield. "Stay back!" Mark bellowed, his voice cracking with desperation, a glint of the knife he had retrieved from his boot now visible against Emily's throat. One step closer, and she dies. Sarah's heart leapt into her throat. Emily, pale and terrified, whimpered, her eyes pleading with her sister. Without a moment's hesitation, Sarah moved, her protective instincts overriding all caution. She launched herself at Mark, aiming for his arm, for the hand that held the knife. It was a reckless, dangerous move, but she couldn't stand by and watch Emily become a casualty of Mark's twisted revenge. The cabin door burst open, splintering against the frame as uniformed officers flooded in, guns drawn, their voices booming with commands. "Police, drop your weapon! Hands where we can see them!" Mark, startled by the sudden influx of officers, hesitated for a crucial second. That was all Sarah needed. She slammed her shoulder into his arm, dislodging the knife, sending it clattering to the floor. Emily, freed from his grasp, stumbled backward, falling into the arms of a waiting officer. Mark, momentarily stunned, was quickly overwhelmed by the police. He struggled, cursed, and fought, but it was futile. His reign of terror was over. Sarah, bruised and shaken, but safe, collapsed onto the floor, Emily rushing to her side. They clung to each other, tears of relief and exhaustion mingling with the dust and chaos of the cabin. The emotional release was overwhelming, a tidal wave washing over them after hours of relentless fear and struggle. The lead detective, his expression grim but now tinged with a flicker of respect, approached Sarah. "You showed incredible bravery, miss," he stated, his voice devoid of its usual skepticism. "Your resourcefulness and quick thinking likely saved your sister's life." The stranger, still tied, was quickly taken into custody, his cooperation noted by the officers. The burner phone, retrieved from its hiding place, was secured, its contents promising a swift and undeniable conviction for Mark. The weight of the past, the shadow of Mark's malevolence, finally lifted from Emily's shoulders. Paramedics moved in, checking their injuries, offering comfort and support. The immediate aftermath was a blur of flashing lights, official questions, and the gentle touch of caring hands. There was a sense of closure, but also the lingering trauma, a raw wound that would take time to heal. Yet through it all, the bond between the sisters, forged in the crucible of shared danger, felt stronger than ever, an unbreakable testament to their enduring love. Weeks later, the chaotic events at the cabin began to recede into a painful memory, a scar on the canvas of their lives. Mark, his face a mask of bitter resentment, had been convicted, his elaborate scheme meticulously unraveled by the evidence from his burner phone. He now faced a lengthy prison sentence, his twisted revenge ultimately consuming him. Sarah and Emily, though physically mending, embarked on a much longer journey of emotional recovery. The police, particularly the lead detective, had gone out of their way to commend Sarah for her extraordinary bravery and invaluable assistance in securing Mark's apprehension. The initial flurry of media attention had mercifully faded, allowing them the much-needed privacy to heal away from the intrusive glare of public scrutiny. Sarah often found herself reflecting on that fateful 911 call, the mundane evening that had irrevocably altered the trajectory of her existence. It was a stark reminder of how swiftly normalcy could shatter, but also a testament to the unforeseen depths of her own strength and resilience. She had faced down a truly terrifying ordeal, not with practiced heroism, but with an innate, fierce protectiveness that had surprised even herself. This newfound understanding of her capabilities was a quiet, internal triumph. Emily, her voice still carrying a faint tremor but her eyes now brighter, expressed her profound gratitude and an even deeper, more resonant love for Sarah. The sisterly bond, once momentarily strained by an insignificant argument, had been reforged in the fires of adversity, emerging stronger and more precious than ever before. They spent hours talking, not just about the horror they had endured, but about their childhood, their dreams, and the future they now faced together. A shared decision blossomed between them to leave behind the echoes of their old lives, to seek a fresh start somewhere new. The process of packing up Emily's isolated home, once a beacon of peace, now a site of trauma, was cathartic. Each box filled, each memory acknowledged, was a step towards liberation. They didn't dwell on the past, but gently placed it aside, ready to embrace the unknown. Their first journey together, after the dust of the investigation settled, was to their parents' home. It was a tearful, yet profoundly joyful reunion, filled with embraces that spoke volumes more than any words ever could. Their parents, witnessing the quiet strength and renewed closeness of their daughters, breathed a collective sigh of relief. The road to full recovery was long, and both Sarah and Emily committed themselves to therapy and support groups, understanding that healing was not a solitary journey. They learned coping mechanisms, found solace in shared experiences, and slowly began to process the trauma, piece by agonizing piece. Sarah, reflecting on her pivotal role in Emily's rescue, found herself considering a new path. The courage she had displayed, the sharp instinct she had honed under pressure, sparked an interest in law enforcement or advocacy. The thought of helping others, of being a voice for the vulnerable, resonated deeply within her. It was a nascent idea, a seed planted in the fertile ground of her experience, but it promised a future imbued with purpose. Emily, too, began to heal. The fear in her eyes gradually gave way to a quiet confidence. She started painting again, her canvases, once dark and brooding, now bursting with vibrant colors and hopeful imagery. Her laughter, once hesitant, became more frequent, more genuine. The locket, the small silver charm that had been a fragment of despair at the crime scene, was carefully repaired. It became more than just an ornament. It was a tangible symbol of their enduring bond, a reminder of the darkness they had overcome and the light they had found in each other. In a sun-drenched park, far from the shadows of the past, Sarah and Emily sat side by side, their faces turned towards the warmth. They were smiling, a genuine, unburdened smile that reached their eyes. The future, once a terrifying void, now stretched before them, a canvas waiting to be painted with new experiences. The lessons learned were profound. The unbreakable importance of family, the indomitable power of courage, and the unwavering belief in never giving up. The experience, though terrifying beyond measure, had ultimately brought them closer, forging an unbreakable alliance. Even in the darkest moments, hope had not only prevailed, but had flourished, guiding them towards a brighter dawn. The 911 call, once the chilling harbinger of fear, had transformed into a powerful symbol of their survival, a testament to their extraordinary strength and the enduring power of sisterly love.